Hello and welcome to today's Agiloft webinar entitled Make Virtual Contract Collaboration Painless. I'm Hiro Notaney, VP of Marketing at Agiloft. This is one of several webinars in the Agiloft webinar series about best practices in contract lifecycle management, what contract management software can do for your legal department and the company as a whole, and how to move towards implementing a solution. I have with me Ellen Nendorf, founder of LPM Executive. Ellen works with corporate legal departments to establish and improve legal operations functions. She covers everything from process improvements to technology rollout and optimization to really help the legal department work most effectively with the resources they have available. Welcome, Ellen.
Thanks, Hiro. I'm happy to be here today to talk about virtual collaboration.
Great. So thanks, Ellen. Before we dive in today, I have a quick housekeeping item. As we move along, please feel free to ask questions in real time. There's a chat box on the right side where you can ask questions. If we don't get to your question during the presentation, we will address it at the end of the presentation. So Ellen, with so many businesses and therefore legal departments operating globally, and a pandemic causing most employees to work from home, partnering with colleagues virtually has become the primary way to work together.
Yes, it's absolutely the new normal for most everyone. Throughout my career, I've actually worked from home many times over the years as part of a corporate employee as well as a law firm associate. And it's safe to say that in those experiences, I have seen the full array of collaboration with colleagues, from good to bad to the absolutely completely unproductive. And so when it's good, it can be really good to collaborate remotely. And as cheesy as it is, teamwork does actually make the dream work. You'd also be surprised here at the volume of pet related teamwork graphics that you can find out there on the internet today. So for our listeners, stay tuned for more in today's presentation. But I had, in terms of good collaboration, I had one of the best teams in an office setting a few years back, and I was enterprise legal software sales at the time, and everything we did centered around contracts. Our in-house counsel was in the same office as I was. It made it so easy to follow up on requests. You could just pop over the cube wall, nudge politely about, hey, where's that contract I was waiting on? I could easily grab someone, even in the break room, to talk about creative contract terms, and it worked really well. There are so many jokes also that I could make here around sales reps politely nudging or creative solutions to get a contract in. But for our listeners now, just imagine that your sales force is also former licensed attorneys who have a plethora of ideas and opinions on how these contracts should work and how quickly they should get turned around. I'm sure our in-house counsel could attest to that collaboration being a little more painful than maybe I could. But in the same position, so coming from this really great in-person setting, which many of us had, pre-COVID, I moved across the country. And so suddenly I'm working remotely, and I went from having strong relationships with my colleagues to battling a time change and not having any face-to-face interaction. So it made it that much harder to catch counsel. I couldn't catch in between meetings. I had to be, phoning or texting or Teams messaging, or, there's so many mediums of communication. And it really felt a lot more like I was just nagging at that point to see when the contract was coming in or what the status was. And so the dream really was not working at that point. And I know that's just not my experience. From working with other corporate legal departments over the years, this is a common problem with remote workforces.
Right, that's so true, Ellen. Speaking of face-to-face, it's such a big part of the way that we have worked. I used to work for Deloitte, and one of my consulting colleagues told me that if he doesn't get on a plane every 4 or 5 days, he starts to get irritable. So doing everything remotely has really disrupted work processes. For some of our new clients who rely closely on in-person interactions to keep tabs on important deals, the lack of visibility into what's going on with those contracts has really been a catalyst to consider digitizing their system. So it's worked well for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, Hiro, visibility. It is the key. It's much harder. It became much harder for me to communicate when I was not in the office. I had nowhere to go to get that visibility, to know what's going on. And so without that, I couldn't set expectations for myself or other business partners or even our potential clients. And that's where it really begins to cause friction within a business. So visibility is the key point here for painless collaboration. I say that, but to showcase what a big problem it is, here's a list of ways that a lack of visibility manifests itself. So you may be thinking, well, we've got an Excel spreadsheet, or we've got this email process, and so like we're doing pretty good, but you might be reading this list and feel some of these pain points more acutely. I will not read through it, but if I had $1 for every time a legal department talked about how to make sure the business wasn't using outdated forms, I certainly could not retire, but I could take a very nice vacation for at least a couple weeks. There's always someone somewhere in your business that has an NDA from 2012 and they're not afraid to use it. So I can also sum up this list as a big blinking red sign reading risk. So with limited visibility, not just in legal, but across the business, your risk absolutely increases.
Yeah, that's a hugely important point, Ellen. Talking to our customers, we found that much more than savings or other financial considerations, managing risk is one of the biggest motivators for businesses and their legal teams to move forward with a CLM solution. That insight was borne out by Gartner, who reported that 73% of respondents in their 2020 Magic Quadrant report for CLM said that they bought contract management to help with compliance and risk management.
That's not surprising at all. I mean, managing risk is really the core function of the legal department, and you can't manage what you can't see. And so business partners are going to feel frustrated if they don't know what's going on with contracts that impact their daily work, and legal is going to be frustrated by that frustration as well. So then visibility is not only going to make it easier to collaborate internally, but it's going to help reduce risk across the business. It's going to save time, effort, and energy that legal spends on ensuring compliance, updating business partners, and legal will also be able to move contracts through review to signature much more quickly without compromising quality.
So Ellen, the reality is, pandemic or no pandemic, the pace of business and the volume of documentation that goes along with it means that you have to leverage technology to cope. So a contract lifecycle management system can bring order to the chaos of reams of paperwork generated not just within legal, but also across the whole business.
Yeah, that's right, Hiro. I mean, to really do this right, you have to have an enterprise level contract lifecycle management tool in place. And that's what we're going to review today. If you have the right tools in place, there's some core features that you can deploy that are going to really make an immediate difference in your internal collaboration across the business. So that's standard contracts, contract status, approval workflows and escalation, searchable database, and renewals and expirations. So kicking it off with standard contracts, it's the starting point for all of it. It removes that risk of outdated forms, and really no matter the size of your legal department, making sure the business is using the right version of an agreement is so important, and it's much harder than it sounds. The up-to-date version that should be used in any context then is uploaded here in the contract lifecycle management solution. So that's a win for legal departments as well, because the business can access those, but then legal can access them too. So everybody has the right agreement in one place, and then the business actually has the ability then to create their own standard contracts.
So that's right, Ellen. This is simply automated document assembly. On this slide, you can see the drop-down menu of standard contracts in the system. The user will be prompted to provide certain key information, and then the CLM will generate the document.
And so NDAs are a great example here. In all the years that I was in sale, legal needed me to actually email the party name and address to create an NDA. Now, 90% of those cases, there were no red lines. Where there were, it was only to change the choice of law. And even then, there were only 1 of 3 states we could agree to. But every time I had to go through legal, I had to email, and it felt silly. It slowed me down. It joined a queue of what I'll call real legal questions. That was where attention should have been focused. And it was a huge point of angst for all of the sales team, and the legal team certainly did not love all of that complaining either. And so with a tool like this, you can allow sales and the business to quickly create their own NDAs. A process can be set up. It's going to prompt the business user to put in the right required information, and it's going to generate then your up-to-date, legally pre-approved NDA without legal spending any time on those individual requests.
Yeah, NDAs are a great example because, like you said, for the most part, they're standard agreements that hardly ever require redlining, but they can suck up a lot of legal review time. Even more complex NDAs are easily automated. So for example, if different terms are required depending on a particular business arrangement, you can set up an automated questionnaire that will lead the business user to the right NDA. Again, without legal having to go back and forth with the business user. We did a case study with our client ASM on exactly this issue. They saved a ton of time by just using automated questionnaires to help with the agreement selection process.
And it's such a significant time saver. And really, I think even when you start looking at the variations you might have had in standard NDAs, there's a lot more that can be quantified, and you can use, as you said here, those automated questionnaires to drive people to the right NDA, even in more complex situations. It's really ongoing collaboration, but without actual individual collaboration on each agreement. Now, this isn't to say that legal is never going to be involved, but it does lift the bulk of that work without compromising the risk. And business partners are going to love it. This also reaches beyond NDAs too, so don't think that that's the only example where you can use document automation for this. MSAs, partner agreements, order forms, employment agreements, non-competes, those are all really good examples of where you can leverage this functionality in a contract tool that's going to add up to continued time savings for legal to focus on the non-standard higher level legal work. All right, so then contract status is next. So contract's been generated. For your non-standard agreements, you're going to have some negotiation, which leads us to the question of what is going on, where is this contract? And so this one to me is such a simple win, but it's with such a significant impact. And realistically, you know, just as an example here, I think I send at least 200 emails a year to my in-house counsel asking for an update on a contract status. Even if we assume that it only took 1 minute for them to read that email and respond, that comes out to 3.3 hours of time spent on absolutely nothing of substance. And if you multiply that out across the number of colleagues that are submitting contract requests and then submitting asks or emails or phone calls about what is the status, legal departments are literally losing weeks of work simply by providing status updates. So when you have it all running through a contract lifecycle management tool, anyone in the business can have access to see the work that is relevant to their job function. So you can maintain confidentiality and privilege, but open up transparency for contract status to the right eyes. So you're seeing that example here. These are the contracts that I have access to. I can see whether it's approved or in review. And that also gives me an idea on when I can expect this. So if I need to set expectations either internally or for a client, I can do that because I know, hey, actually I've got one more step to go here and then we're going to be ready for signature. So it really eliminates the where's my contract questions that you as the legal team or contract managers may have coming flooding in every direction. And then for the legal team, because certainly you want to be a good business partner, but also, you know, for yourself, it also helps assess workload and allows you to easily cover vacations or leave. Everyone knows what's going on and exactly where it is. It's also helpful for review that's needed outside of legal, such as IT security, insurance and risk, finance review. So everyone is going to reap the benefits, and particularly legal, who is managing oversight of this, as to exactly where contracts stand, and there's no guessing as to what's left with a contract before it's going to be active and in place.
Great. So let's talk about approvals, workflows, and escalations. This is probably the #1 frustration for both legal teams and business users. The struggle to make it through the layers of approvals, just needed to get a contract through.
And it feels like it's getting more complicated every day, honestly. I recently worked with one company that was putting a partnership agreement in place, and they had several business units that needed to review the contract and approve it, as well as finance, IT, compliance, and legal. Now, they were doing this outside of a contract lifecycle tool. They were doing it by email and meetings and kind of what I'll call the old-fashioned way. And the approval process was a bad game of ping pong. So one of the business units sent a delegate to a review meeting who signed off on the agreement, but they didn't have actual authority. So then later that business unit re-entered the mix just before signature with a whole slew of questions and concerns. We had a finance contact that was out on vacation and had no backup. No one knew who could step in and assist. And so the process just dragged on for many weeks. There was no clear path to signature. Everyone just kept saying, well, we're working on it. And by the end of it, the agreement did, of course, eventually get signed, but the internal stakeholders were so frustrated, it was truly a joyless accomplishment for them. And that's just not what you want to be bringing to the table for the business. So with a tool like this, you can eliminate the confusion and roundabout workflow by setting up a standard automated process. And this is important then, you also keep the business moving by having escalation points in place. So if someone is out on leave or if someone's just dragging their feet, the system will then ping the escalation user to make sure that things can get done.
Yeah, that's right, Ellen. What you see on this slide, you not only have the benefit of automated, consistent process, but there's the ongoing visibility into where the contract is in the approval process for everyone involved. And as Ellen mentioned, you can also set up sequential and simultaneous approval chains and include alternate approvers to eliminate those bottlenecks.
All right, so we've got contracts created. We know where their progress is. We've got really strong approval processes in place. Next up is then a fully searchable repository. So this is another simple but really significant win. And so for all of you who are listening and currently storing contracts on a shared network drive in the legal department, access to a fully searchable database of contracts is going to blow your mind. In the example here, I'm running just a quick search for contracts that contain an IBM warranty. How many contracts do we have that have the IBM warranty? I want to know what that language is. And so I just simply search for that, and it's going to pull up every contract that meets that criteria. I can see what the status is, what the financial impact was, and even the relevant text right here.
Great, so we do have a question that's come in, so I'm going to answer that one. How can we get the actual timeline that's showing right now, e.g. draft, pending manager, pending approval, etc.? So the answer to that question is it'll be on your dashboard. So you can set it up so that you can see that information when you first log in. So next, let's talk about, I just wanted to mention the search features have built-in OCR and full text search. So this is a fully searchable repository.
Yeah, and the importance of that, Hiro, when you have this as the single source of truth for contracts, when you're doing those search, because you can access, PDFs or really any document that's in there, you can trust that you're not missing anything with these search results. So if you're looking for, I need all of the contracts that have a particular warranty, you've got it when you run the search. Anyone on the legal team can find what they need quickly to address and respond to those business questions and make good decisions.
Great, and so the last feature we will touch on today is expirations and renewals. Contracts are already in place, so how does this help collaboration?
Right, so the questions into legal and contract managers do not stop once the contract is in place. There are requests for a copy of the agreement or questions about when it renews or what notice is needed for cancellation, just to name a few of the many questions I'm sure you've all seen. And so because, again, you can have your colleagues across the business access the contract lifecycle management solution to see contracts relevant to their job function, they'll also be able to see upcoming expirations and renewal deadlines. You can see the example here of a dashboard. It's showing contracts by type. You've got exactly how many are expiring in the next 90 days, how many have expired, where they're partially approved. So you've got all of that information. And around expirations, then you can have the business taking action before it's too late. It's not just this view when you log in, but you can also have email notices and reminder notices going out of the system as well. So for large contracts, you might need to send a reminder notice to the business partners about a year in advance to give time for negotiation. So they don't even have to remember to come in and check. The system will remind them when it's time. And for those smaller contracts where 90 days might be enough, you can set that up. So you've got really flexible system to provide information to the business when it's needed. And the more timely the information is for the business, the more engaged they're going to be and the more likely they are going to actually take action then. To allow legal to really shift the accountability to the business users to manage upcoming renewals and take those steps.
So thanks, Ellen. I'm just going to answer a couple more questions that have come in. So one is somebody, I guess it's Nicole's having trouble getting the dashboard to show properly. Is there someone? Yes. Is that someone that can reach out to you? Yes. We'll contact you after the call, Nicole. And then a question from Anya: where is the notification period noted? I'm not sure I understand that question. If you want to elaborate.
Here, I'm wondering if it's around when you've got an upcoming expiration, where would you note, how many days in advance you're getting that reminder, like 90 days in advance?
You would just set that up when you're putting that contract in. I hope that answers the question, but if not, ask, maybe elaborate on that. So we've heard the term digital transformation so much that we kind of glaze over when it comes up. So one of the silver linings of our current situation with this pandemic is that it is in some ways forcing us to evaluate how technology can help us in our work. So the Agiloft webinar series is another great resource on the benefits of CLM solutions and how to successfully get a solution in place. So let's open things up for general questions. We had a couple more come in, so I'll just jump right in. So one is, how time consuming is it to train users across the business? So that one's for me. Generally, our goal is to make the system intuitive for end users. So we're constantly looking at UI and UX enhancements. So for end users, the training is fairly minimal. For admin or power users, it depends on how passionate they are. Agiloft has an award-winning out-of-the-box CLM system, but it's also a powerful no-code platform. So you can configure it to do exactly what you want and extend it into all sorts of adjacent areas. There are lots of examples of customers using the system for much more than CLM. So for example, Chevron uses Agiloft for Sarbanes-Oxley compliance.
And here, I think this question is really, if we go back to the NDA example we talked about earlier, in terms of training for your business users who are going to be able to create their own NDA, I mean, training is virtually zero, other than here's the link to log in and here's how you create your login, if you're not using single sign-on, of course. But because there is in-step instruction with the process. So when they log in to create the NDA, there are going to be pop-ups that come with instruction for them on how to complete these fields so that they can get to the right result. So there really is such minimal training across the business to use, especially the document automation and even the status updates for your business partners.
Yeah, good, excellent points, Ellen. So another question from Nicole. She says it's off topic, but she's, is there a specific webinar that covers notifications and how to successfully set up those email notifications? Yes, as a matter of fact, there is. In our webinar series, I believe there's going to be one specifically on notifications. And she notes that they use Agiloft in 3 other ways: certificates of insurance, policy renewal tracking, and for legal claims. So yes, so that's a good plug for Agiloft. Obviously, it's it's a end-to-end CLM system, so you can track all kinds of stuff in it. Everything to do with contracts. So question from Anya. What is the average time needed to identify or even find the agreements in order to create the repository? I found that identifying the contracts and finding them are very frustrating steps that need to be taken. Okay, so this is a data input question. So I think the question is about how you input your existing contracts. There are various ways to do that. Yes, it is something that needs to be done. We have a pretty sophisticated data input engine. Some of it is AI based, so it does take a little bit of the pain out of that process. So it's a complex subject. We have, and the answer to that is, when you're choosing a CLM system, you should look at that part of it because that will be the first step. Next question. Yeah, go ahead, Ellen. Sorry.
I'm going to add to that too, just from a practical perspective. I think the average time depends on your own internal current situation, right? Do you have everything on a network drive, and so you're just plucking that network drive and then importing it into the contract tool? That's a different story where you really can leverage AI to speed that up. If you've got contracts in the network drive and some other systems, maybe procurement has some, maybe sales has some, you know, if you've got them disparate all over the business, there is going to be that time to kind of, you know, get your arms around everything that's going on. So what that will look like depends on how centralized you already are with where the contracts are stored.
Thanks, Ellen. So a question from Rajendra. Once a contract is approved, does it automatically go to, I'm assuming it's to the next person or to a third party? The answer to that is yes, you set all that up, you decide what the workflow is for the contract. You can either set it up sequentially where it goes to the next approver in the chain. You can set it up for simultaneous approval where people can approve it simultaneously. However, whatever works well. Okay, so another question. Can certain negotiable terms from other departments like insurance, finance, billing be built into agreements as options for end users? So the answer to that is yes. So as an example, standard net payment terms are net 30 days, but for contracts over $50,000, finance will approve up to net 60. That logic can all be built into the contract process so that it's all taken into account. I guess the broader point is with a contract management system, you want it to work the way that your work processes currently work. Okay, I'm going to do final question because we're coming up on the half hour. What are the pricing options? A range is fine. I want to figure out if it's even a possibility. So we've got that info. We've got a pricing page on our website. Generally, I think we do it on a per user basis. So I want to say that number is as low as $65 per user. But if you reach out to us, we can provide you with some info based on your particular situation. Okay, final question. How does the Agiloft system handle third-party agreements, e.g. software licensing? It handles it as part of the contracting process. It's a full out-of-the-box system. So the short answer is it handles it well.
Anya, I'll just add too, we did a webinar at the end of June, June 24th, if you go to the Agiloft webinar that talks about AI, but it addresses how you can use AI to help with third-party agreements with some of your review and negotiation. So that might also hit on a little more color for third-party agreements that are coming and not being generated in the system itself.
All right, great. Thanks, Ellen. So we've come to the end of our time. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you like this webinar, you can, we have a weekly series. I think the next two are training webinars, but join us for the full series. It's on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific. Thanks again, everyone, for joining.